the easiest, being able to count to 21 and you knew that.
The hardest part was about everything. I was very young, only 19 years old, and very, very clumsy.
Take this group back 50 years, and it wasn't as regulated to the 21 steps until you hit the mat.
Welcome back to episode number 2. Today I've got a couple of characters on with us. I got Staff Sergeant retired Joe Hull, who walked down in 2007 to 10. I've got Sergeant First Class retired Roy May, who was down there 2002 to 2005 as Assistant Relief Commander for 2nd Relief. And the ever-present Carnell Nettles, who served in 2nd Relief from 1983 to 1985. And of course, everybody knows who I am. So let's jump on into myths. Actually, we're going to jump on into questions first. This is one of those questions that have been floating around the interweb, and it was on this email. I don't know, it's been out for about at least 10 or 15 years. And some of the things in the email are correct. Some of them are not correct. And that's why we're here today, to try and solve some of the mysteries and the myths behind some of the stuff that's floating around out there in the public. So the question is, and I'm going to ask Joe to field this one. The question is, why does a Sentinel carry his rifle on the same shoulder all the time?
So the question's already establishing inaccuracies, because we don't carry it on the same shoulder all the time. We always carry the weapon to the outside shoulder, which is away from the tomb. I assume that that would be same when they move the mat down to the actual front of the tomb. So, and that's to put the weapon between the bystanders, whoever's there, and then the tomb itself. So we never actually carry the weapon on the same shoulder, which is why every time we turn and face, we swap shoulders to face away from the tomb.
No, that's good. I was not a Sentinel, I was a relief commander, so I didn't do that job when we were doing the disinterment. Carnell, you were assistant relief commander, I think, at the time of the internment for the Vietnam unknown soldier. When you guys changed the mat to the not quite lower landing, but the mid landing, did you have the same protocol with the shoulder or the rifle being on the outside shoulder from the tomb?
Absolutely, the same thing. The same way that Joe mentioned, to show protection of the tomb, to keep the bystanders away. So yes.
Okay. And Roy, I'm going to ask you this one. What was the hardest part of learning that portion of the manual as a Sentinel?
The portion of keeping it on the shoulder, or just the rifle manual in general? Because as far as keeping it on the shoulder between us and the crowd, or like I got told it was the gap, the great American public. It's a security issue. It's to show that you are between the crowd and the tomb, and you're there to protect the tomb. And that's why you always keep it on the shoulder closest to the crowd. And it's not necessarily meant in an intimidating manner, but it just has to do that you always keep it in between you. You're like the rifle, you and the tomb. So you have the rifle, and obviously you'll see a million videos of us talking to the public to be quiet or step back or get behind the change, or don't walk out on the plaza and take pictures, because you're not allowed to do that, even though the rails should tell you that. But the rifle is, you always keep it between you and the crowd as basically the security measure. That's a visible security measure.
Nice. And I know that we talked last time about how hard it was to pick up the 21, learn how to do, obviously, the count, pick up the steps, the cadence, the marks. Now we're kind of transitioning, and this question starts talking about the actual manual of arms. And so Joe is as a new guy down at the tomb, was that difficult to pick up after coming from the regiment?
For me personally, no. And I think every tomb guard has their area where they either excel, and then they have that one area where they just suck at it, for a lack of better terms. So for me, uniforms, I was horrible at uniforms, but the manual and the knowledge portion, I got pretty quick. And since I wasn't at the regiment for that long, it was kind of fresh. I was essentially hadn't learned much at the regiment. So when I went to the tomb, that's what I started learning from the get-go. So I think for me, it was an easier transition to learning tomb manual than like any other manual.
Okay. Carnell, when you were there, was there a big change between normal Army manual of arms and the way the Tomb Guards did it?
In a word, yes. It was more crisp. It was more definitive and when we would do heel click, just to use that. My knees still tell me what I used to do. We would clear the map. You will hear cheaters up at the mast of the main. Okay, so that's something that was going on. You would hear the manual arms as far as going from left to right shoulder, slapping the weapon. You would make sure it had some kind of very definitive snap, especially left shoulder, that you would still have it. So it's not like the traditional old guard manual arms. It's basically got for the 22-5, but it allowed us to go ahead and do things and make it more definitive, specific, and unique to an unknown soldier.
Roy, when you were down there, did they still, and again, I'm a relief commander, so I'm not a sentinel. So I remember that the guys would come, they would rock off and hold, and then drive it across, pause, and then snap and turn. Is that what you learned?
See, I'm with Carnell. Like I broke screws in my cheaters because we used to Harley kick, kind of start the heel click. We got like we would rock out and hold, and you just hold it there. We got to the point where Regiment actually said we needed to reel it in a little bit. Like they reeled in our heel clicks, and they tried to bring us almost back to 22-5 by standard. So when I was there, it was this weird transition period of a ton of like flare, like the rock out and hold, the drive across, the slow push out, and then kind of the flip on the rifle to run it to your other shoulder. I mean, we wanted to break the stocks. Like that's how deliberate and hard we wanted to run our manual. And like my relief commander literally broke a stock on the 360. I mean, we were out there to be crisp, loud, and clear, because the louder you are, the better it is when you're out there at a guard change and you're both loud, but you're in sync. And so our manual, it was a weird transition period because they tried to bring us literally back to Army manual, and then there was this pushback, and so I was down there kind of in a weird period because we had some regimental command changes, but the majority of ours was still the rock out, hold, drive across, push out, and flip. Absolutely.
Right, because Army standard 22-5, when they come off the shoulder, as soon as it basically breaks the bill of your cap, but then it immediately comes over and it just gets put onto your shoulder. And I think that's kind of where they may have gone back to for a little bit of time. But when I was there, it was roughly the same. You know, you rock out and you hold. You didn't hold for long, but you drove across. It was very crisp, very powerful. Like you said, you're trying to break the stock to make that sound. You mentioned, Roy, that you had a relief commander that broke the stop. Did Carnell, Joe, did anybody else have that similar problem?
I have any.
No. A couple down in the quarters and the catacombs for training, but no. And I think those were just too small at the what do you call it? A little small portion from the butt up to
like the hilt.
Yeah,
there it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they were just too small.
I didn't have anybody break any stocks or anything, but I was down there when they were essentially getting rid of the flare, if you want to call it that, and going back to the 22-5. Because like the first 2.5, almost 3 years I was there, it was, you know, you rock out, you held it, you slap, you know, you made loud, crisp noise. Everything was supposed to look like the rifle was floating, you know, from your shoulder, float across, loud pop, spin it with a loud pop, you know, it's supposed to float, you know, back to the other shoulder, and so on and so forth. And then I know when we got a former Tomb Guard who came down there, it was his third time down there, and he was taking over his SOG. He wanted to go back to the 22-5, almost identical to that. So like we got rid of those loud heel clicks, but I was kind of on my way out the door then. So.
All right. Well, I guess the question is, I'm going to ask each one of you, starting with Carnell, since you're the senior badge holder here. What was the hardest part of the Sentinels manual to learn?
Ensuring that your angles are correct. So as whether you were doing a rock off, is it straight up and down? When it went across, are you coming towards your head or are you going straight across? Ensuring that your butt was of the stock was where it needed to be versus having someone tell you at the end of the mat, go, butt left, butt right, or whatever. And just using the mirrors to actually hone your skills and your craft. Being delivered at every angle, because people will see you from every angle and be able to go ahead and use the manual arms the way it should have been. That makes it very direct as far as the path of travel of the weapon, whether it's going left or right. That's the hardest part, I think.
Okay. Roy, what do you think?
I could not agree more. And this kind of pulls in what Joe was talking about a little bit, where there's 3 areas, right? Knowledge, uniform, and outside performance. And everybody's really good at 2, right? Everybody sucks at 1. I was awful at knowledge. But I'm gonna echo what Carnell said. Like the angles, not just when it's at the shoulder, but we used to do mirror time on the rock out from the shoulder, and we would hold it for you start 30 seconds where you hold it. And then you get to a minute and you're creating that muscle memory to where every time the rifle moves, the angle is important, not just when it's at the shoulder. So I have this fantastic picture somebody took where I was rocked out and they took a picture, and like, it wasn't just rifle manual, but your posture, the stripes on your pants needed to be vertical. Your cover, the horizontal gold band on your cover needed to be horizontal and parallel to the marching surface. Your forearm had to be parallel to the marching surface. So your ability to keep that parallel and maintain the rifle angle left, right, butt left, butt right, and so I think learning the manual wasn't difficult. Getting the manual right was difficult. The rock out, drive across, flick, and put to your shoulder, and you could teach anybody to do that. But to do it all at proper angles at both shoulders and maintaining that while walking, it was that was my favorite thing, was being right. Like I loved spending mirror time, being a total nerd about it. I did. I loved it.
All right, Joe, what do you think?
I was gonna say the same thing. And May had kind of touched on it, but like, not rocking out and your body going forward with the rifle, or your body going backwards to compensate, making sure that your body is still not moving when the rifle is just moving. You're not moving your head around the rifle, stuff like that. Because I spent hours making sure that I was moving the rifle around me and not me around the rifle, because then it would throw everything off. Angles. But yeah, I think a lot of it was just making sure. Because I did the same thing. I would rock out, first it was 30 seconds, then it was a minute, then it was a minute 30 downstairs in front of the mirror, making sure you get that muscle memory. And then we would, do the drive across over and over and over. Like we would just break it down in piece by piece and do it over and over and over to make sure we were hitting those angles, make sure it was muscle memory. So, yeah.
Well, I think Gavin, you might have touched on it too. And Joe just talked about, you rock out and your body doesn't move. As a relief commander, doing the weapons inspection and not leaning forward or not leaning back or moving too far left and right. There's a ton that goes into all of it. We love it. We love that ton that goes into it.
Right. And I was going to say that is something that was brought up in the first episode, was angles and how important our angles were on the simplest things. And the public just doesn't understand that we take angles into everything. And that's why we did the mirror time, was to make sure that we were doing it right. As a relief commander, the hardest part of my weapons inspection, learning that manual, was just the first move. That took forever. When you take it away from the Sentinel and you're holding it and you do that first spin and you bring it down, there's so many angles involved in that, and trying to control that so you don't smack the Sentinel in the knees with the bayonet, or you don't hit him in the face when you take it from him. All those kinds of things. Again, where it's like, as soon as you feel like you got it, then you look from the side and you're like, oh dude, you ain't got it. You get back in the mirror and do it again. So angles, I think, is anytime you talk about posture, anytime you talk about the manual of arms, or just the way the tomb guard moves, the public doesn't understand that the angles are critical to us doing our job correctly. So,
Carnell needs to make a t-shirt, angles from every angle. You
There
nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, there you go. And I got an alibi too. I think it was always very good, and this is something for pitchers. Our hand position and our arm swing. Okay, when you pick up that, you change the guard and you pick up that third person, and you seeing those arms go back and forth, same distance backwards as they're going forward. That makes it look very, very good, and that takes time. So that's another thing, because everybody's arm doesn't move the same way. So to get that to do it, yeah.
What is it? 6 to the front and 3 to the rear is what the Army says, and the tomb guards say 3 to the front and 6 to the rear, dude. That was my biggest hitch in really refining my walk, because my arm used to swing behind me. I couldn't keep it kind of in a vertical slot, and it still haunts me. Now that I say it out loud, I'm still upset about that.
Well, it's so interesting you brought that up, Carnell, because now I know we're kind of diving in the weeds and the editor's going to hate us for this, but my arms didn't swing the same way when I would walk. One, because I got the pistol on the hip. So you can't get that nice crisp movement along your leg. You have to kind of do this little bow out so you're not smacking up the pistol. And then my left side, I've had injuries on the left side. So then I wouldn't bring it forward. So they'd always ding me as like, you're not having the same, arc of your arm swing. And this again into the weeds, dog houses, open or closed?
Close.
Closed. Open at regiment, closed at the tomb.
Right.
That's just the question. It's always closed.
Well, hey, we know, but this the anyway. So
open it. Well, but what's a doghouse? Explain that. You can't just say a doghouse.
They're gonna be sitting here thinking of like Snoopy on a doghouse now for this
Oh my God,
recording.
these guys abuse animals. Somebody call Sarah McLaughlin.
So doghouse is when you're holding your rifle, especially an your right shoulder, left shoulder. The way that you hold the buttstock, either your thumb is closed to where there's no gap in between on your holding your rifle, and we'll get some pictures to show that, or it's open. And I know that, with white gloves, it's obvious when your doghouse is open or when it's correct and it's closed. So, okay.
So it's either your doghouse is closed or you're a communist. Those are pretty much the only two options. Correct.
I second this.
All right. Well, thank you for answering the questions and going into the rabbit hole in the different areas there. We got to stay on topic. So the myth for this one is kind of interesting, and I'm sure we've all heard it, and it is definitely out there. And when I was working for the society as a president, I'd get comments all the time. The people that guard the tomb are United States Marines. I'm going to start with Carnell. Have you ever had that rumor? Have you heard that rumor? Have you dispelled that rumor? Have you run into a Marine that said, I was a tomb guard?
The latter, no. I've heard about it for many years. As I came up, we had Gomer Powell and his dress blues for the Marine Corps. And I guess if you didn't know a person viewing us on the mat, they would assume. I never liked the comparison of us being a Marine. You got respect for the Marines, but I never like to hear anybody saying a Marine, still to the day. But yes, I have heard it. I want to say Sergeant Carter and Gomer Powell, the Jim Neighbors thing from years ago, that was something that may stuck in some people's head. But Marines had nothing to do with the tomb, and also unless it was armed forces ceremony going there.
Joe, what do you got for me about Marines?
I've heard it over and over and over and over and over, and usually I ask them, the Cran question, and then I dispel the rumor. But I know that civilians, when they see a Marine in their dress blues and us in our dress blues, I can see the similarities. But and most civilians are ignorant to the different branches. I've had civilians that are, oh, your Army and their Army and their Army, and that's Navy. And I'm like, no, that's the Marine Corps. That's the Air Force. Like the Army, you're thinking of the United States military. And it's so very often it's everybody's in the Army, and then the Army breaks into different branches, but the Army is not a real branch. So I've heard that too.
Really?
So I've heard, because they forget that it's the military and not the Army. So they just assume everybody's in the Army and then you're a subsect of the Army. And I'm like, no. Everybody's in the military, and then the military is the umbrella. And then you have Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and then possibly Coast Guard on the side, and now some people going to space. So, but yeah.
Okay. Roy, what do you got for us?
I think us being Marines is probably one of the most repeated myths of all the myths that we address. And so when I try to address it cordially, I try to explain to civilians, say, the easiest way to tell the difference between the Army and the Marine Corps is the stripe on the pants. The Marine Corps have the blood stripe, we have the gold stripe. That's the easiest way to look at it. And I get it, because there's this glamorization of the Marine Corps. There is. And Hollywood has something to do with it, and just kind of this grandiose of what the Marine Corps is. But no, we're the United States Army, we're the Old Guard, 3rd Infantry Regiment, and we've been doing this for a long, long time. If you want to talk to the Marines, drive over to 8th and I.
And that's a good point. I have yet to run into the guy at the bar that says, I was a Marine and Tomb Guard and all this kind of stuff. I think the misconception is that, the Army is the senior service under the umbrella, as Joe was talking about. We are the senior service. The second senior service is the Marine Corps, and that's only because the Navy was disbanded for 1 month after the Revolutionary War. So they, Marines get bumped up to number 2. So they're always shoulder to shoulder with us whenever we do color guards or we're doing joint things, because they're right there. And you're right, their esprit de corps is amazing. The warriors that they have are amazing. I love the fact that every Marine is a rifleman. I think that's a great concept, especially in time of conflict. I think that they instill tremendous values and professionalism in the warriors that join the Marine Corps. But the Army is a senior service. And so when the duty came down in 1926, and they were going to detail a unit to take this mission on, to guard the unknown soldiers, they went to the senior service. And at the time, it was the 3rd Cavalry Regiment that was assigned to Fort Myer. And they picked up the duty amongst a couple other units there in the Military District of Washington. And then the Old Guard picks it up in 1948 and has been doing it ever since. I know as a relief commander, I think one of the most memorable moments was when I was handed a letter by the sergeant of the guard saying, you need to address this. And I mentioned this before in a couple of things, but the letter comes in and it's from this mother. And she's lamenting about the fact that the Sentinels yelled at her son because he must have violated, the chains in some way, shape, or form. And he immediately started crying and was distraught and said that he's never going to join the Marine Corps again because the Marines yelled at him at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And as a young staff sergeant, my response was pretty simple. I boxed it up, I put it in a letter, and I sent it over to 8th and I, and I let them deal with it, because we're not Marines, so I don't need to answer that question. But that's just one of those funny things that had come out from those kinds of rumors that are out there, that Marines are guarding the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
It's like accidental army recruiting right there. He's never going to join the Marines. He's going to join the Army. Oh,
yeah. So we should yell at more people. That's
that's the takeaway. We should yell at more people.
I was known as a bit of a jerk on the plaza when it came to like respect and civility around the plaza. Like I was a jerk.
Yeah.
Like
well,
shut up.
I mean, and that's what I think. And now we're definitely diving into the weeds into something else, but that's another question for the day. Does the Sentinel ever speak when he's out on the plaza? And we can dive into that. But yeah, there's a mission that we have. It is an active duty military guard post. It is not a ceremonial function. It is actual guard post. And we have very specific set of rules under the general and special orders that the public will hopefully, through series like this, be able to understand why a Sentinel would suddenly break from the mat to address someone in the crowd. So right on. Anybody got anything for the good of the order?
For that, I got one. Mine's real world. I think I was not even a badge holder or brand new badge holder. The wife I had at that time brought my children up. Well, my one child. And she saw her daddy. She was out of stroller. So she came running to her daddy. And I had to go ahead and bust her down right there where she was. Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So
parenting 101.
And then, like I said, and I'm sitting there watching the whole thing unfold. I said, why would you let her out of the stroller? She's already saying daddy. Okay. And then at some point she wanted to go ahead and get a hug or whatever she wanted to do with her father. So if it's good enough for my child to go ahead and make sure that they're respectful, anyone that come there was going to get the same, no less, definitely no less. And that's the way that's one thing I know that happened. That's it.
Well,
Okay.
I wasn't probably as loud or I guess we'll call it vocal as a walker, but when I started changing and you kind of have that different mindset on the plaza that as opposed to being part of the guard change, you are running the guard change. And I think you get that kind of in your mind. I even changed my guard spiel up as far as the emphasis that I put on certain words. When it got to the end, it was requested everyone remain silent and standing. And I would much louder and like, no, for real, if you haven't heard anything, hello, professor stomping their foot on the floor. And I wouldn't say thank you. And I wouldn't turn around until everybody stood up. And if somebody was still sitting, I would literally knife blade them and be like, stand up.
Yeah. No, I did the same thing. I had the big pause after that portion of, of standing, silent and standing. And I'd just stand there and look at him, and everyone would figure out he ain't doing anything until we all get off our butts. So,
and you'll see, and the crowd starts to, they're like, hey, stand up, stand up.
They're looking around. And he's looking at me.
I'm not trying to be big boss man. I'm trying to make you understand the reverence and the importance of this ceremony. And I think that's one of the things that we all, whether it's in the 80s, early 2000s, 2010, Gavin, back when you were in the Cav regiment doing the Tomb Guard stuff.
Carnell.
but it's as much effort and everything that we put into this. And when we talk about these angles and how shiny our shoes are and how perfect our uniforms are, it's not to look good. It's just, it never was about us. And the people that go down and try and become Tomb Guards because they want to be, they want to tell people they're Tomb Guards, are the people that don't make it through training. Your motivations really have to be in the right place for the right reasons. And these are the people that become Tomb Guards. So as I'm sitting here now and I couldn't fit into a pair of blues pants that somebody paid me, like that was the standard that I had. And it wasn't for me, it was for the tomb, and it was for the reverence and the duty and the obligations. And honestly, I say this all the time, the privilege. It was for the privilege to do so.
Right.
And honor. Great honor.
Very true. Thanks again for the spirited conversation. I keep looking at Roy on this one. We had a good topic today, which was talking about the rifles and the manuals and why it's important that the Sentinel keeps the rifle on the outside shoulder away from the tomb and protecting the tomb as a visual barrier. And one of the myths that came up, we don't always keep it on the same shoulder. It does rotate. And then of course, breaking down the myth that Tomb Guards are actually United States Marines. That is not the case. We are the senior service. The mission was handed to us by the War Department in 1926, and we have carried that mission ever since as the senior service of the Department of Defense. So guys, thanks for taking the time. We look forward to episode number 3 and welcome you back and all of the great comments and questions.
Outstanding. All right. Thank you for having me. All right, gentlemen, be well.